15 Minutes with Federal Training Academy, where busy professionals gain valuable insights in 15 minutes or less. Hello, everyone. My name is Angela Kachuba, hosting this session of 15 Minutes with Federal Training Academy. And I am honored to have Federal Security Director Jerry Spero with us today. Thank you so much for being here. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to invite you on to this particular episode is because this is going to air during the summer. And when I think of summer, I think of summer travel. And so you are in charge, essentially, of, if anybody in the audience, if you have traveled through Philadelphia, air travel through Philadelphia, Jerry, you're responsible for pretty much TSA in Philadelphia. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And actually, my responsibilities are all of transportation security. So it really goes beyond the airport environment, but that's what most people know best.
And partnering with the other groups, right?
Oh yeah, all of our DHS partners, federal, state, and local, yes.
All right, so tell us a little bit more about your career, and then we're going to do some time traveling together with our 3 questions today.
I look forward to it. Yeah, thank you. First of all, it's an honor, a privilege. Thank you very, very much for having me on today. So I am a 33-year federal employee. I'm the Federal Security Director, TSA Philadelphia. Basically, the majority of my career has been spent either in federal law enforcement as a federal air marshal or in inspections, investigations as a special agent. I tell people that I've held pretty much every job in transportation security that one could hold.
All right, well, that's great that you have all that experience. So then you're going to be able to share some of that experience throughout time. Let's do the first question. Are we ready?
I am. Go for it.
So, Jerry, if you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of career advice, what would it be?
So that's a really great question, and I'm not entirely convinced that my younger self would take advice from me. But having said that, I mean, how many times have I thought, gee, I wish I knew then what I know now? And I don't know that I would really change too much, but there are a couple of things that I would probably say. The first would be just to listen. So, the Greek philosopher Epictetus said, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And that's been quoted many times, and everybody knows what that means. It means you need to listen more. But I want to kind of take that a little further and say, it's also about listening to the right people, or as my grandfather would say, sorting the sense from the nonsense, right? So as a young, new, impressionable federal employee, I was presented with a lot of sense, which I didn't always recognize, and unfortunately more nonsense. And I'm not sure why we as humans tend to gravitate more towards the nonsense. Maybe it had something to do with survival eons ago. But it's so easy to connect with the wrong crowd in your career and get moving in the wrong direction. But the secret is that it's just as easy to get with the right crowd. And if you listen and you sort the sense from the nonsense, you can do that. The next thing I would say is keep an open mind. The government is not perfect. We all know that. Nothing is. But it's in the imperfection where the opportunities are. And if you look at those as challenges that you can overcome, then it becomes fun and engaging, and that's where you really make meaningful contributions. Take advantage of all the opportunities, young Jerry, for personal and professional growth. I know at DHS and TSA, for example, we have many, many programs, degree programs, leadership programs, development programs. I could go on. And I know from talking to my federal colleagues, it's similar a lot of federal agencies. Take advantage of those things, because the only limitations that you have are really the ones that you place on yourself. And then lastly, I would just advise to volunteer for everything. I heard something the other day that really rang true with me. They were talking about 2 kinds of people in the workforce. People that are very detail oriented and people that are very big picture oriented. And I think they referred to them as the birds and the frogs. And that really rang with me, because obviously you need both to be successful, right? The frogs are the subject matter experts, they're down on the ground, and the birds are up in the sky with the big picture. But what I would say is, outside of some very narrow career fields, I think the birds are always going to have a bit of an advantage competitively when they have a broader view of things. So that's why I say volunteer for everything. And then there's one added benefit, which is decision makers will recognize when you volunteer for the tough jobs that nobody else wants when the plum jobs come along, right? Everybody wants the plum job. So those are the things I would tell myself, and I hope I would listen.
Those are wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this. I really like the idea of being a strategic thinker at a young age, especially at that task level as you're trying to, especially for those individuals who are aspiring leaders. So some of the work that I did as a contractor with TSA was the Foundations of Leadership course, where it's those individuals who are moving into their first time supervisory position. There were a few managers that were in there as well, but opening their eyes to that next level. And so with the 3 tips that you just gave, individuals will be well primed to go have that upward mobility into that level. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, thanks. I really wish somebody had that conversation with me, early on, but I do think it's a conversation that has a lot of value if they're willing to listen.
All right, sharing the wealth. So let's go into our next question. What generational, so if we're going to bring ourselves up to speed, we're in the current time now, right? We're not in the past anymore in our time warp here. So if we think about the different generations and how our workforce has changed dramatically, you've been in the workforce now, in the federal workforce, for 33 years. So talk to me, or talk to all of us about the generational differences that you've seen, and what advice would you give?
So I have to tell you, I just love this question, and I get asked this question a lot, and I've done a lot of research on this subject because I just love reading about it. Okay, so we all love to pick on the millennials, right? Especially the baby boomers like me. And we talk about how entitled they are and how impatient they are. And I especially love the little snippet about, well, everybody gets a participation trophy, right? But before I go too much further, I have to put this out there. If they're entitled, who's responsible for that? We need to look in the mirror. So, for example, I'm personally the father of 3 millennials and a Gen Z, right? And they're all good kids. Well, they're all adults now, but they're all good kids, hardworking, not lazy, and not entitled. And I bet every parent will say basically the same thing about their kids. So where do all these lazy, entitled millennials come from then? I wonder. Next, I'm not going to label an entire generation. There are millennials who are members of our military, our police force, first responders, among the very best of us. And by the way, the oldest millennials are in their 40s now. So just think about that for a second. And in my career, I've seen members of other generations who acted entitled or lazy or what have you. The truth is, I think for some, it's just used as an excuse to justify or explain away challenges they have in their own organization. It's much easier to say, oh, those darn millennials, than to work on ways to learn how to connect with them, right? Because that takes work. So do I think there are generational differences? Absolutely. Just like the generation that came before me thought I would never be successful, right? And on it goes. I think the key is to embrace those differences, to leverage them, because there's power in that, right? And if I, as a boomer, if I'm confident in who I am and where I am in life, I have no need to fear millennials or anybody for that matter, and the talents and skills that they bring to the table. So I would be foolish not to leverage those talents. And I've also found that, notwithstanding the rumors, millennials are eager to learn.
Yeah.
And as leaders, we have a duty and a responsibility to embrace that, empower them, and grow the next generation. Because, hey, I don't know about you, but we're not going to be around forever. So why not take advantage of that while it's there?
So when you also talk about entitlement, I've also seen this in the federal workforce, especially. I've seen individuals who are baby boomers who almost feel entitled to respect from the younger generation. And I often think, well, whose shoulders does it lie on or fall upon in order to connect? And if you are of the older generation, I think it falls on our shoulders. I'm a Gen X. So I'm the sandwich right between the baby boomers and the millennials. I do have a millennial adult child and two Gen Z kids, right? Or adults. And so if we think about it, though, it is this idea of, all right, is it our responsibility, the older generation's responsibility, to reach out to the younger generation and to embrace the talents that they have and find those talents? Is often what I'm telling leaders is when I have a leader who says, you don't know what it's like working with this person. Just come work with this person for a week. You'll understand. And I'll say, okay, well, how about you tell me 3 positives about that individual? Can you give me some of the positives? And they'll say, you don't understand, Angela. I've told you there isn't anything, right? They're not contributing. It's like, well, wait a minute. They are. Everyone has something. There's the gold there within each person. And I do feel like it's our responsibility as well to find what that is, to figure out what those talents and strengths are, and then to delegate appropriately and allow them to shine.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, regardless of what generation, respect has to be earned. And I think if there's that trust built and that confidence and we do the work, and I do mean that, we as boomers, we as Gen Xers have to do the work to learn to communicate with this group. Because look, they have different priorities. They consume information differently. They're not us, they're them. And we have to learn how to understand them and integrate them, and they'll appreciate it, and the respect will be built.
Yeah, and I've been so thankful to some millennials have helped me greatly when it comes to the virtual environment. It comes to any social media. During lunchtime over at the World Bank, I had an individual encourage me to join LinkedIn. And I said, well, I don't really know it very well yet. And he said, oh, I'll teach you everything you need to know in a half an hour. Are you serious? He's like, yes, absolutely. During lunch, that's what we did. He is my LinkedIn mentor to this day. Thank you. Shout out to Rudy. All right. So let's move to our last question. We're going to travel into the future. Travel into the future now. And what would you tell future generations? So if you were to wave your magic wand and make an improved federal workforce, what would that look like?
Boy, I could have some fun with a magic wand. So I think what I would do is I would waive it and remove a lot of the barriers to what I consider effective leadership in the federal government. So kind of let me put that in context. I would let leaders lead. So how? Well, the federal government, I think, just has too many rules. We're always talking about how to be more effective, how to be more efficient. But look at things like our procurement process, for example, or how we do personnel practices. And, so many of the leadership courses I've taken, like the ones that I've listened to you, use private industry as the example for us to follow. But those companies and those corporate leaders generally don't have the bureaucracy that we have, and they have a greater ability to make decisions, take risks, spend funds, whatever. And if they're successful, they're congratulated, and if they're not, they're held accountable. So don't get me wrong. This isn't about my agency in particular. We're actually empowered to do many things. This is directed more at just the government-wide federal system in general. And look, I understand that many of these policies and procedures were put into place. They were probably well-intended, and at the time, they probably served a purpose. But I'm just not sure that's really true anymore. And so I'll use the story of the tortoise and the hare. Of course, everybody knows the story, and the moral is, of course, slow and steady wins the race, right? Well, I beg to differ, because in the federal world, slow is just slow. And I think the race is won by those who are able to be increasingly efficient, as is certainly true in the corporate world. So I think we as the federal government need to take a really long, hard look at our business practices and find ways to be more efficient. So if I could wave my magic wand, that would happen. And if I were to have a second wave of that wand, I would add one more thing. Just imagine how effective we would be in serving the American people if we were all rowing in the same direction as a federal government. I'd like to see all federal agencies working closely together towards the same goals and objectives. And I saw a glimmer of that after 9/11. And I guess it's kind of a shame that it took something like that to bring us all together. But unfortunately, it didn't last. And so I'm not saying that certain agencies, departments, groups don't work together. And I recognize that a lot of us have very different missions. But if we're really being honest, sometimes it feels like we're in competition with one another for resources, for budget, among other things. So again, just imagine how successful and effective we could be in fulfilling our mission if we all work together. That would be a good and important wave of that wand. I think.
Yeah, the partnership, the collaboration among all the departments, all working together, that sounds fantastic. And thank you very much for joining us for this episode. I appreciate you. But one quick thing. So, how many people travel through Philadelphia every year?
Oh, well, generally speaking, we have close to 15 million people that utilize the airport. Now, the numbers are a little skewed because of COVID over the last couple of years. But to give you an idea, in 2019, our last full year before COVID, we actually set a record 33 million passengers inbound and outbound through Philadelphia.
So everyone, we received leadership advice from someone who essentially supervises, manages 15 million people a year in some capacity. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Look for more information online describing this episode. Thank you very much.